Draft Animal Power Network is a nonprofit that seeks to help people to find community and knowledge about working animals. And today we're having a DAPCHAT, which is like a conference, kind of Zoom conference, where we have interviewers well, I'm sorry for the the name in interviewers, I think. Yeah, that's the right word.
Sure. Yeah.
And we can all ask questions. The only thing that we ask is that you either raise your hand virtually like this if you have your camera on, or that you raise your hand via Zoom if you can make it. Or you can text in the chat, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question when I can tell you to go ahead. It's just so that we don't interrupt Chad while he's talking about and explaining his business, his life, his horses, his everything. So let's start with you, Chad. Who are you?
Uh, my name is Chad
Oh,
Miano. I make a living logging with horses. I uh, started my company in 1995 uh, for a variety of reasons, but so I guess this year makes 30 years. If I'm doing my math right.
that's
Um,
the math I have.
I started when I was 22 years old, and I'm 52 now. Um, and what my what I was after, I was raised with an awareness of we of the forest and the environment, and I was always drawn to working. I like working outside, working with my hands, and just when I discovered logging with horses, I knew it was for me. I'd been going to college and was burnt out on school after 2 years of business school, and uh, I'd been working on an organic farm and had been introduced to working horses, and it seemed like I liked doing it. I had a knack for it. I learned fast, and then once I was introduced to the logging, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And
So,
there's been a lot of people in our area that did a lot of talking about solutions to uh, wanting better forestry management, less clear cutting, uh, a lot of talk about it, and horses were talked about it a lot. And I've always been the mindset of let's do it. So
Chad, who put leather in your hands? How did
I
you, who put leather in your hands? How did you start that? Were you first introduced to it?
I a man that was a friend of my parents owned an organic farm,
Oh, okay.
and I started. He had two pairs of horses, and I started working there in the summers when I was going to high school. Uh, and just doing regular farm work, and as a laborer, and but I would help with the horses. And so there was a fella there that was the teamster at the time, and I would help him, and you get to helping, and it just is like, I kind of like this. This is pretty neat. And so we made maple syrup, and we were at the time the southernmost maple syrup producer here.
Right.
So I got to helping so that's how I got introduced to dealing with the horses, harnessing the horses, by helping this fella Then every now and then he'd let me drive him a little bit, like, pulling the slap sled up the mountain, and I had a feel for it. I had a natural feel for it. So it just came to me naturally. And so as things progressed, and then we put up all the hay with the horses. And in the middle of hay season, this fella and the owner had a dispute, and he quit. And so and in the beginning, the motivation was I could probably pry some more dollars per hour, you know, by hey, I said I think I could do this. We were cutting hay. I said I believe I can handle that. And I had some experience with a horse-drawn hay mower and stuff already. So and had an knowledge of mechanical things. I could run the mower, and there was an older fella that owned a farm adjoining where I was working. That he was old school. That's all he'd ever done all his life was work horses. His name was Carl Price. He's passed away now, and I could say that he's the guy that officially, as you say, put the lines in my hands. And he was just an old school farmer. And we went up there first day, going to mow a patch of hay, and he took and cut the field in, as far as went around the edge a couple times, cut the field in, and then he turned around and started going around the other way and made a pass, and he said, "There you go." And I jumped on it and I made 2 rounds, and he stopped me and he said, "Well, I'm going to town." I said, "What do you mean going to town?" And he said, "You're doing great." He said, "There's no problem." And I got a kick out of him. He wore those Pointer brand overalls, and he had his work overalls over top his going to town overalls. So he just took the other outside pair of overalls off, and he said, "I'll see you after a while." And he's going to town, and I mowed. I don't know, it's a couple acres, and that's how I got started, was working on the farm.
Was it loose hay?
Yeah, we put up loose hay. We
Nice.
made we raked it with a dump rake, and made windrows, and then we made shocks in the field. If
Hmm.
people are familiar with shocks, and then we would move the shocks, and sometimes we would feed the shocks, and keep the hay in the shocks, and then sometimes we would pull the shocks to a haystack and make a stack. And we also had a big hay sled. It was 16 feet long and 8 feet wide, with raised sides. And if we were gonna,
A
well,
sled, you said?
yeah, big wooden hay sled, you
Wow.
know, and said it was 16 foot long. It was 8 or 10 feet wide,
Yeah.
and we were going. That's what we used to put the hay in the barn. So we'd
Wow.
rake up the windrows, and then we'd go through the field, and we would just put the hay on the sled. And he taught me how to put the hay on in such a way that we would pull the hay in front of the barn, and we used 2x6s as ramps,
Hmm.
and brackets in the loft, and you could take a cable and a hay hook, put down in the load, and if the load was built right, it would pull the entire load up in the loft. And
Oh.
sometimes it would pull the load in half. It would pull like a top layer off, and then we'd rehook and pull the bottom layer. But it would pull that whole load. Like I said, the sled was 16 feet long, and uh, we would probably put 8 or 10 feet high of hay on that thing.
Right.
And
And
if you
you'd
don't,
like
if you
step
put
on
it
it,
on there
right?
right, it would come off the sled.
Right.
So
Yeah. I mean, it's impressive to hear that you could put that much. I mean, how many, how many trips a day could you do? Because with wheels, I mean, here we do it with wheels, and it's like the worst days are like 14 trips, but it's like crazy. How many trips could you do with a sleigh?
it's you talk about 30 something years ago.
Sorry.
uh, I don't remember how many trips. I mean, we could put up several acres of hay, in a day. And
Yeah.
if we had enough help, it requires, you needed. a fair amount of manpower to load the sled, and then once we pulled the hay up in the loft, we would have to take and arrange the hay in the loft so we could get the next load up. Uh, so we would do a couple acres of hay, no problem. Um, and it was there he didn't have, I don't know, we might have put up 20 acres of hay or something in hay
Right.
season.
Okay. I was just getting excited about hay, but I think people want to hear about your business, your logging business. But um, here's a question for you. You own Suffolk Punch, but did you start with them, or like what made you shift, and tell us the story about breeds of horses that you work, and is there a reason why you chose them?
I've had uh, I've had Belgians and Percherons. I started with uh, I started with a small team, uh, and it was a little Suffolk mare, and she weighed 1,300 pounds.
Wow.
And I bought a pair, and it was a little Suffolk gelding. He was a little heavier. He might have went about 15. And the little gelding just didn't work out, and I ended up. Uh, the guy that sold him to me said if I wasn't satisfied, he'd buy him back. So I took him back, and we ended up buy, just finding a horse. And I look back at it now, we didn't know what he was, but a little gelding, that little 1,500 pound gelding, that I'm convinced now that he was a part bred Belgian Brabant cross, or he was a full blooded Brabant.
Right.
Uh, and we called him Rocky. And we went, this old horse trader guy is what we ended up uh, getting him from. And we harnessed him, drove him a little bit, but his feet were big, like Shire, like, and there was a reason for that. Because first few times that we put shoes on him, he like to kill us, but we worked our way through it. And that was my first team.
Right.
And um, but I had a friend that raised Suffolk horses and used Suffolk horses, and uh, just working with him, and being introduced to the horses, I really liked them. I liked their temperament. And it was several years, that was my first team, and then I bought a pair of Belgian geldings as my second team, and then I had a Percheron horse there in the mix at one time. And I had been in the business for I think it was in 1999 that I was able to buy my first full blown 1,800 pound Suffolk gelding. And he was, it just that I was just partial. I just liked working with them, and everybody has there's certain breeds that they gravitate to, and it's the Suffolk, and its temperament, and its conformation, and it just worked well for me.
Um, Chad, am I wrong to say do you have, because now you breed horses, right? You have them, do you
Yes,
have a breeding program? Yeah, okay. Um, I don't know. I've heard this through, but I'm not sure. Tell me if I'm wrong. Do you have a bit taller Suffolk punches, or am I wrong?
I uh, I have a pair now that are, uh, and they're not your normal Suffolk for sure,
Right.
but they're a pair of 18 hand geldings. Uh,
Okay.
they're the one gelding is, uh, last time we weighed him, he was going 2,400, and the other gelding was going 2,250, I believe.
Wow.
So. they're as big a pair as I've ever had,
Right. I mean,
and it just
that's big for Belgians too. Sorry.
I didn't those two I didn't raise them. I bought them as young horses, and for me, my way into Suffolk horses were I generally had to I got horses that other people didn't want, so to speak. That's what I could afford, and that was the case with these gelding. And they have their uh, peculiarities, you could say, but I saw potential in them, and I've had them together now. The one horse we call Alabama, I started him in 2012. He's been working that long. He was 4 years old in 2012, and he's coming 17 this year, and he's still able to. You know, he's still athletically, physically fit, and still able to do this work. He's at the end of his career for sure, but um, and then the horse I have with him we call Chief, and he is 2 years younger.
Right.
And I think he was probably 5 or 6 years old when
Right.
and
And but you breed horses. Well, you have do you start your own stock in the woods? No.
I have a registered stallion we call Cedar. He was born here on the place,
Right.
uh, and he's coming 15 this year, but he's been logging since he was 6 years old. He's part of the. I have two teams working currently. My big pair of geldings, and then I have Cedar with a young Suffolk gelding that I got last year. We call Little Ricky. So we have Alabama and Chief, the big pair, and then we have Cedar, and you know, I'm fortunate we have come a long way with our horses. Like I said, starting out with a 1,300 pound mare and a little hard headed 1,500 pound gelding, and now my stallion's going about 1,800 pounds, 1,800. He'll fluctuate 1,800, 1,850 pounds, and little Ricky goes probably about 1,740 right now, and we call
Right.
them the little team. And
Which
compared to the geldings that they are, but they're good sized horses in their own right. And
right.
so that's Cedar and Ricky right there in that picture.
And in that picture,
In that
Cedar and
picture,
Ricky.
that's Cedar and Ricky right there.
And the other picture?
That picture there that's on my profile on Facebook, that is an older pair from back in the day. That is Dan and Jim.
Right.
Oh,
And I'm gonna switch topic, but it still relates to the pictures. Um, you've switched harness styles. Can you
yeah.
um can you tell us why, or do you have a reason, or you don't? And also, where do you get your harnesses, and how do you make them? How do you find pieces and everything for your harnesses?
I started out with what they call traditional Western style harness,
This.
and with the pole strap and the flank straps that come underneath the belly, uh, to hold it's like a logging cart back, and those style harnesses carry all of your tongue weight on the collar, and so that's what I did for years. And uh, you have to there's no room for, in my mind, for error with that style of harness, especially using a real heavy logging cart like I have. So you have to have everything just right, or you're going to have trouble with galded shoulders, galded neck, and you're somewhat limited in um, the tongue weight you can carry. and that I can go off on a big tangent here. Because on these logging carts, basically the style of logging cart we use is just a big lever on wheels, and so the heavier tongue that the more weight you can actually put forward of the fulcrum of the cart, the better it's going to perform. The more weight that it can move before it rears it up in the air and loses its leverage. So the older style harness was limiting in those factors, and I didn't know about a D-ring harness until uh, I got to know some of the people from the northern part of the country, New England area, and
Commonly called the D-ring geeks. No, I'm kidding.
and and so I never had any major issues with the older style harness because I always stayed on top of my collar adjustments. Uh, the collars you have to run when you're carrying a lot of tongue weight with these log carts. You have to keep your collars fitting on the tighter side. You have to keep your draft right, and but I would have trouble in the summertime. Was and so I got to searching for an alternative, and I was introduced to this D ring, and friend of mine finally, pushed me into. It was basically she said, uh, "You're getting a harness. And that's just the way it's happening." And so we uh, I had a pair of stallions I was working at the time, and we 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 got a pair. That harness in that picture there uh, is from Bowman Harness in
Okay.
Ohio, I think, and it's a biotene harness. It's a very well made harness. Got all stainless steel hardware on it. Um, but once I and then I bought for my geldings. Uh, what's the name? It's in Pennsylvania. I think it's Peach Lane harness, and it's just a nylon harness. It's a little cheaper harness, but I really like it,
Hmm.
and it's affordable. I think I don't know. I bought this. I've had that harness now going maybe 4 years now. Uh, give $800 and something dollars for it,
Right.
brand new harness. But I had but I bought the harness without bits or without hames. Because I use the heavy duty pulling hames, and I've got my own bits. I didn't need bits, so that brought the price of the harness down some. But other than that, the harness it's all nylon and it's all stainless steel hardware, and I've had good service out of them. And uh, I now would not, for what I do with this logging cart and stuff, it's superior harness. It it
Right.
it gave my team a lot more ability to handle the cart in the woods, especially on tough terrain. Uh, and
Right.
then
Because, sorry, go ahead.
um, and then I used a wooden tongue on my logging carts for many years, and then you know I converted. I went to a steel tongue, a telescoping, steel tubing, quarter-inch steel tubing tongue, and so it starts out with I think I forget the sizes now. Say a 3-inch piece, and then the center section's a 2.5-inch piece, and then the last section is a like a inch and a half or two. I forget the approximate sizes, but they'll slide in and out of each other. So the length of each segment, the three segments, is adjustable. So I can adjust the tongue length and for different size teams. And then,
Right.
but these tongues are heavy, and I couldn't use these tongues without that D-ring harness. Uh, but uh, and I found that anything less than a quarter inch, if they fall on it, they'll bend it.
Hmm.
First tongue I made was 3/16 steel, and a horse fell on it and bent it. And just by going up to a quarter inch, which is only a 16th, it's those geldings at times have been down on that tongue and they have not bent it. It's strong enough. If I haven't bent the tongue, I don't know if it can be bent. We
And
get pretty rough situations
I'm
sometimes.
I'm trying to find a picture of your. We'll go through all the pictures, but I was trying to find a picture of your logging cart. If you could, I have found one. If you could
I don't know if
describe
I've
it, and
got
what do you like about it?
really good, where it shows that's just yeah, that style of logging cart. It's nothing that I came up with on my own. That style there, a group of us down here that loggers here in Virginia and all. Anyways, we call it the Fisher style cart. Many years ago, a man named Charlie Fisher, who horse logged in Ohio, that's the style that he developed, and then was passed on, through folks to me. But now these two carts I have are from the original design, have been heavily modified. As I've through the years, I've come to see and made uh, changes that were beneficial to what I'm doing and my specific type of terrain. We live in the mountains, and while not all the work I do is on really tough terrain. A lot, most jobs I do will have some pretty decent logging, but there's always parts of it that are real tough, steep, steep downhill, side hill pulling, uphill pulling. There's always elements of that. We live in some pretty diverse terrain here. So what I like about this card is that it's versatile. That it may not do any one particular task the best, but it does them all very well.
Right.
I can use this implement because on any particular job, I'm not throughout the day. Even in a skid, we may come uphill out of a draw, come across level ground for a few hundred feet, and then we might be going down really steep ground for another 1,000 feet. So it varies, and this cart is able to it deals with all of that very well.
How high is that cart? Like where you put the chain on? Like how high is it?
That right there, and you would think I would know that specific measurement, but I don't. But it's probably around 36 inches, something like that.
Right. Okay. So
A
it's
lot, a lot of logging carts are taller, but the taller the cart is, the more if you get pulling side hill, you know, they're easier to turn over.
right.
Again, we're trying to find a happy medium here with uh and I've often, one of the next as I'm always as I'm working and I'm always modifying these carts and stuff. Uh I am going to build, especially because this big team of geldings I've got. I'm going to change one of these carts and make it a little higher. And all that means is I'm going to change the spindles and the hubs in their location of where they're welded to the cart and pick it up. And I'm actually going to, these carts that I have use 15-inch truck tires, and I'm going to change the spindles and hubs I'm going to put a 16-inch tire
Good.
on them, 8 lug. They got 5 lug hubs on them now. I'm going to go to an 8 lug spindle and hub, and that's so the tires will be a little taller, and I'm going to pick the cart up some. I'm not decided exactly how yet. I haven't gotten into it how much, but and it'll accommodate my big team better.
And um I don't know much about carts. I just bought one from someone who was handmade, and I don't use it in the woods. But how about like width of the tires and how inflated they are? Like, is there a specific, what
I
specific
that
idea about?
cart there is because it'll fit one. What's unique about it is it'll fit between the fenders in my horse trailer. So that's about the cart. That cart there is 6 feet wide, a
Yeah.
little over 6 feet wide. Because it fits right. Because what I like about it is that I can put a team on the front of my trailer, and then I can put the cart on the back of the trailer. So in other words, I can show up somewhere. I can put the team on the front. I've got all my logging gear up in the neck. I've got it fixed. I can hang out my harness in on each side of the trailer and put the cart in the back. So I've got a little self-contained logging operation right there at the trailer. Other than hauling the logs or loading the logs, but I can show up and pull my cart out and I'm ready to skip. And I've got everything there with me. And then the way that my double trees and all that I made them, I can take all that stuff apart. So I can take that team as they stand on that cart. I can take them off the cart. I can take my double trees apart. I can work the horses single if I want to. I can take the single trees off the double trees, and I've got gear and hooks and stuff to uh, and lines. I keep all that with me. So if I wanted to take a single horse and set some logs off some steep ground, I can take that unit apart, pull the logs to where I can get to them with the cart, and then put them back on the cart, put the stuff back together, and then use the cart. Or I could take the team off the cart and just log them with the double tree. The double tree's easily taken removed from the cart. So I kind of built it in that. My mindset was because all of this now we build ourselves. My carts and all of this stuff we build it ourselves. We had plans that we started with. But
And there's no leverage, right? There's no to unlatch the logs.
I
It's
don't
it's fixed.
I don't have a trip. Uh, a friend of mine lives in Kentucky. His name's Ben Burgess. He builds carts, and he builds the base design of what he's building comes from this Fisher style cart, but they've did their own innovation and touches to it. And Ben and them have a machine shop. They used to do machine work. So he built a trip that works very well. It's a well-made mechanism in that you can, stomp a pedal and the rack flips and the chain will fall out of it.
That
I have
doesn't.
never, I've just never, I don't know. I've never really, it's never become a necessity for me. Um, so I just have never put one on my car. I have a rigid piece of flat bar with notches cut in it, and I've never really had an issue. There's been times the drawback to a rigid bar is that if you do get in a wreck and the cart is flipped over, there are times when you have a lot of pressure on it that you can't get the chain loose. That can be an issue. Where if you had a trip, you could trip it. So there is advantages to the trip mechanism. But I always just giving Ben a hard time. I always told him, I said which I'm sure it would, but I would always tell him, I was like, I don't know if that thing would stand up to my horses. I might rip it completely off the cart, but, but yeah, I'm just giving him a hard time. That's
I
if
mean,
his horses doesn't rip it off the cart, I don't think mine will either. But I still like to give him a hard time.
I mean, yeah, or like trip your foot at the same time because I think that's the major complaint I have for that mechanism.
And and I, you really can't even see it there, and I'm not sure. Like when I get into big log, I use what you call grabs a lot.
Okay.
So you know. I call them grabs. Some people call them dogs, but I call them, logging grabs. I've been using them now. I was introduced to those really early in my logging career, and I've used them ever since. In situations where I know they may be an issue, we might have a wreck. You do it long enough, you kind of know where some skids might be kind of little. This might be dangerous, but I'll use the grabs instead of a chain, and you can skip the grabs.
Right.
So,
I was
uh,
trying to find a picture of your grabs, but I can't
and
find
I probably
it.
didn't send you. Actually, I think the one of those logs is in there's different ways that you can hook those grabs to the log in relation to a cart. That uh, as the logs get bigger in diameter, the cart is there's less lift. The less the cart has an ability to lift the log. So once you get logs that are as tall as that rack on the cart, you can't just hook a single chain. So what I'll do, some people will take and put two choker chains on the end of the log and have it tighten up on each side. Um, I don't personally care for that because if you're doing a skid and you start and stop a lot, those chains they'll work their way off the end of the log if you stop and get slack in them. But I'll set a grab on each side of the log and and um, and get greater lift that way. So
Right.
that's how I do what we call a double hook or whatever. As I'll set a
Really?
grab on 90 on each side of the log, and then I usually set them at an angle because the cart's pulling from up. So I'll set the grabs at somewhat of the heels of the grab facing up. I don't put them 90 to the log, and that works real well on bigger logs. It'll probably double the lift of what
Right.
you would be getting otherwise. But
Um, and so Chad, when you get the logs to your landing, what happens next? You sent me, I'll show you them. You sent me pictures of, is that your log truck, or do you haul your wood to the mills, or
I do it all for different reasons. Like I said, everybody has different ways that work for them. Um, I have a knuckle boom loader. You can see it there in the picture.
oh, yeah.
I have my own log truck. That's a special built truck. That's a hand built truck. When I bought that truck, it was a straight truck. And through trial and error, and that that is what you call a dead tandem on the back of that truck. So it's an axle that I put on the back of the truck that is for weight carrying and stability purposes, and also ground pressure purposes. And what that means is that this truck goes off road really well as compared to a regular straight truck. Uh, and it's got to be set up right. And a friend of mine many years ago in North Carolina, that's what you call old school.
Yeah.
Old school when these trucks, that's a 67
Okay.
60 series Chevrolet is what that is. Now it's been completely rebuilt, but that's what it is. But from back in those days, that dead tandem was common. People didn't have live tandem trucks where you had two drive axles in the back. So that truck started out as a straight truck, and a straight truck just if you're going to put a big load on you're not going to be able to get across any kind of uh, sidling ground. Like I said, the type of terrain I work in, we're going across. A lot of the work I do, people have me doing it because they're not wanting a bunch of roads built, a bunch of excavation done, and so I'm going to go through the old farm road, through the pasture. Might just go through the pasture. There's no road, what have you, and so I had to have a truck that could do that. And that tandem gives that truck stability, so you're not going to turn it over. And it also lowers the ground pressure. That truck's not going to cut the ground like a straight truck's going to. Truck with just one axle. Plus, because it's a 2-ton truck, the truck empty only weighs 13,000 pounds. And
Mhm.
I've got it tagged for 40,000 pounds. So I can scale right at 14 tons on that truck. So it makes the truck economical because it's got a big payload capacity. And I've been hauling. I bought that truck in 1995.
No way.
And so it's moved. I don't know. It would have to have hauled over 1,000,000 feet of timber at least. I mean, if I've never sat and added it up as far as like what we might have gotten out in the 30 years. But if you just figure it's 100,000 feet a year times 30 years, that's 3 million feet. So,
Right.
and I've hauled most of it on that truck. But getting back to your original question, it gives me independence of where I can haul my logs when I haul my logs. And it also, like I said, because of the way the truck's built, I can traverse the terrain I need to get across. And the truck is of a size that my horses can handle it. Like if I've got a rough place to get into, I can drag that truck anywhere as I need to go, empty, no problem. And the horses can even handle it loaded. We've had jobs where it just was rough conditions in the middle of winter, and it seemed like you couldn't haul enough gravel, and we drag it in the morning, and then log all day and load it, and we drag it out in the evening, and load it,
Wow.
uh, and then I prefer that knuckle boom loader's and on an old B model Mack truck. It's a '61 B model Mack, and uh, all this stuff is older stuff, but I've went through it. Like I said, piece by piece with my own hands and rebuilt this stuff. This loader's all the hydraulics have been rebuilt, and I really like a knuckle boom loader because uh, I can set it up. It doesn't take a lot of room for me. I just need a big enough space to park the truck and just a little bit of area around it to stack logs, and there's logs stacked on the lower side of the loader, and that's what I pulled in. We hadn't stacked those logs yet. And what I
How
like
long is your
about
arm? How
it's that thing will reach that loader will reach 18 feet.
right. Oh wow.
It's
Okay.
it's a decent sized loader. It's not a huge loader, but it's for what it is. It's a pretty good size. I've never had anything that it wouldn't pick up, and it
Yeah.
just it. I like it. I do have a skid steer that in certain situations, uh, like my loader's on this job, and I've got some logs to go get something comes up to go get somewhere else. I'll take my skid steer and load the truck. Or a small job that might be just 2 3 loads of logs. I may not choose to move the loader over there. I'll just take the skid steer and load the truck. But the knuckle boom, in my mind, is superior to like my skid steer or anything because it doesn't tear the ground all to pieces wherever you're. Uh, my landing won't be. There's just no way around it. If you're gonna have a landing and do any amount of loading more than a couple loads, you're going to chew it all to pieces with a track machine or a wheeled machine. I've got a wheeled machine. Uh, so you have to watch where you put a landing with a skid steer or and but I just really like the knuckle boom.
Right.
And I can load the truck much faster with it than I can my skid steer. So
Yeah. I'm I'm just getting jealous because we can do that in Canada. There's too many rules. But it seems like the perfect world to yeah. And so you don't pay anyone to handle your wood. You just bring it to the mill and like you sell it there, right? It's just
yeah, and the other my mind on as far as having it it is an expense to have the truck, but I just for my mind is I've paid for hauling on different situations, have self loading truck. They've got those things around here. you know, come get my logs. And but I always looked at, you start slicing that pie up. There's only so many slices to be had, and if I was going to pay, X amount per load. No, I look, I'm investing in myself. I've got a truck, a log truck, and the money I put in the log truck, I'm investing in myself because, like I said, it gives me more versatility in what I can do, and what I can offer, and then also, you really can't tell it, but I can pull my horse trailer with the log truck also. So
I could see a hook. There's a hook in this
it's got a hitch on the back, up right
itch.
there on the back. I've got a gooseneck hook, and I also have a pendle hit. I can pull a gooseneck trailer and I can pull a pendle hook trailer, and that gives me more versatility. I
Right.
generally bring my horses to the log job. I've got a diesel pickup, but sometimes that thing's tore up, and I can just hook to the old log truck and go on to
And
work.
you don't you bring your horses back home every night, right? Or do you leave them on the job?
When we're it for me, the if the it depends on the length of the commute, so to speak. If I'm 40 miles, for me, is the breaking point of hauling the horses every day. If I'm closer than 40 miles to the house, I'm going to bring them to and from the job, because I just rather have them here. All my horse infrastructure's here. Um, it's to me, it's a six one way, half a dozen the other proposition. If I keep them on the job days that I don't work for whatever reason, uh, or whether I still have to go to the job to take care of the horses. I've never been one to, which there's, I've had landowners that would probably feed my horses for me and that type of stuff, but I've never, if my horses are on the job and I'm not going to work, I'm going and I'm taking care of them and checking on them. It's just kind of how I am. And also, I had times where we were keeping the horses on the job, and we through the years, from time to time, we had trouble messing with people messing with the horses.
Right.
Uh, not necessarily all in a nefarious way either. I don't need people coming and feed my horses a bunch of apples, for instance. You know, um, and that type of stuff. Uh, or I don't need people uh, doing nefarious mean thing like cutting the electric fence, or some jobs are remote, and you got to worry about deer and other animals tearing the fence down. So it can be a headache. So if I unless it gets to be where the haul is too far, and for me in this area it's about 40 miles. It's where the breaking point is. I'm going to bring them home.
Yeah. And so you talk you say we a lot. So who does that imply?
It
Your
depends.
kids.
Uh, well, we is myself and my children.
Right.
Uh, since they were big enough to, I'm a single man. I'm divorced, and uh, I'm a single parent, and my children, since they were big enough to waddle their little hind ends into the woods, they've been a part of. They've grown up doing this alongside of, and they all can do the work. That picture there is my youngest daughter. Uh, I'm not sure who that is. That's probably my gelding. Uh, but she can drive them. She can, they all. My youngest son, his name is Craig. He's 14, almost 15 here in a couple of months. He's already pretty good with the saw, doing saw work. Ellie Mae in that picture, that's my youngest daughter. She's 17 this year, but she's been driving these horses since she was, I don't know, 12 or 13. Um,
Do
my
any
old
of
son,
Oh, sorry.
you've got a picture of him in there, but he is from the time he was that's Ellie Mae. That's Craig right there, my youngest son. We
Okay.
were that's my pull sled that we uh
Yeah.
train when we're for the pulling competition. I've got big concrete weights that he's sitting on there. But he was riding with our rooster there on the sled. And I thought that was pretty funny. You know, he's got him a pet rooster, and him and the rooster's pretty tight. So he came over at the rooster and jumped on the sled. So here we went, horses, kid, rooster. We's all just going along. So, but
And so,
I say we. That's what I mean because they're you know it's a family operation. Uh, my oldest son now he went to college and he got a degree in environmental science and in forestry, and he
right.
now he was going wanting to be a state forester, but he ended up his road led him. He is the head maintenance ranger at a local state park now, and but he still helps me in his spare time. But from the time he was big enough, he was my right hand man, and he just turned 23 years old this year, and so he's like I tell people he's done his bit, as they say, for king and country, helping his dad, and while he grew up logging and likes doing the work, but it's not what he wanted to do professionally. So and I always told him that I don't expect you to necessarily be a horse logger, but I want you. What I expect is that you need to know how to do the work and to appreciate what we stand for is what was important for me. But so now
That's
he's
fair.
he's got his ranger job and doing well with that, and so the younger son and my younger daughter are filling those shoes now, so to speak. And from time to time, I've had people that I've hired to help me. Um, I guess as I've gotten older, I've become less tolerant of that situation. Uh, so I like now, if my kids are not helping me, I've worked through my career as much by myself as I have with help.
You make
And
me feel old, but I understand your point.
you know, uh, and I can't move the wood in a day that I did when I was young, but I can still move a fair amount of wood. I'm still pretty capable at my age. So,
We
um,
don't doubt it.
uh, and then when I first started, I've got two younger brothers, and I'm the oldest in the family, and they were in high school, and so on the weekends and holidays and every spare moment, those boys was in the woods with me, and we were quite a force. Uh, we could move a lot of wood. We were logging two teams. Uh, the next brother in line next to me, I called him the lead man. He cut timber, cut trail, and then the youngest brother and myself, we would drive. We were the teamsters, and we could really move a lot of wood. We really, we were all young and and had a lot of sibling rivalry and that type of stuff. And we'd argue and fuss and fight a while, and then we'd log like hell for a while. And but we could, like I said, but that's we would move hundreds of thousands of feet of timber a year when we were all working together. Because in the summertime, that's what we were doing. When
Right.
those boys were out of school, we were logging.
Sounds
Uh,
like sounds like your brother was a really good cutter.
well, I'm the oldest. I'm 8 years older than my brother Todd, He was the next brother, and then the youngest brother. I'm 14 years younger than him, older than him. He's 14 years younger than I, and and we crammed him in the woods when he was 12 years old, and he was Mister. I'm gonna rebel and whip the whole world, and we was like, no, you're gonna drive this pair of horses right here. So he was the well, he'd come off the mountain and you'd think the horses were running away because he'd be behind those horses driving them. You couldn't even see him. But, we'd go at it, and but now my brother Todd since is now a clinical pharmacist. Well, he's a research pharmacist now, with a PhD. So he's Doctor Todd Miano these days, and but he can cut timber, he can harness a horse, he can drive the horses. Uh, that pull sled that I was talking about that we use, he built that pull sled when he was in high school. He fabricated it and welded it up. So
Right.
that's where he started with his skills. But he's a smart guy, and he was interested in chemistry, which led him into pharmacy, which eventually led him into now he's doing research. So
And when you're talking about your pulling sled and the pulls that you go to, how, because how do you compare pulling timber and like going to the pulls? Is that even something you can compare, or like, and what makes your horses good at pulling in a pulling area arena arena?
uh, it's when you work a team long enough, in the woods, they learn good form, and they learn how to apply themselves, because they have to apply themselves in a lot of diverse situations. So they learn how to place their feet and to get good purchase, and how to position their bodies in different situations. And then after a while they really get a feel for each other, and they know how to work together really well. Uh, and there's similarities, between logging and participating in a horse pull, as far as you're pulling a lot of weight. Uh, but there's a lot of differences. There's times in the woods where I have to ask a lot of my horses, and that a log may be in a difficult situation. It may be like right now I'm working two teams, but I alternate them. I don't bring both teams in the same day when I'm by myself. So we get a log in a tough spot, uh, they got to bring it. That's what
Yeah,
we do. And so they may have to. It may be a situation where they are only able to pull it a few feet at a time in the beginning, to where they get it up into a better situation, and go from there. But that's very seldom am I going to ask my horses to pull all they can pull flat out while I'm working. If we do, it's going to be, we're going to keep it to absolute minimum. We're going to pace them and load them so they can work all day long. That's the mindset. A horse pull is you're going to start out with a weight, and you're going to keep adding weight to you're taking them to their maximum effort. So it's a different ask and a different mindset, especially for the horses.
right.
Because what we do down here, we pull 27 and a half feet. Uh, that's when they are loaded. 27 and a half feet is a long way. Sometimes it seems like it's half a mile. So and so uh, just logging them in the woods doesn't properly prepare them if you're going to be competitive in the horse pulling.
Right.
So I have a
We-
sled here at the house,
Yeah.
and so I want to properly prepare them for if I'm going to ask them to do it, I want to properly prepare them for it. so they know what they're up against, what they're being asked to do. And so that's why I have a sled here, because it's a different type of, most of the time, even on a really, really big, heavy log, once you get it moving, it's easier to pull. Once the
Right.
cart gets it moving, the cart gets a little lift, and usually if a log's in a rough spot, you can, so to speak, break it out. Once you get her broke out and get her moving, you've pretty well got it. Where a sled, once you get it loaded, it don't get no easier. It's a really hard pull that as and usually when it's loaded really heavy, as they go along, it gets harder to pull as it starts, digging in the ground and pushing dirt up in front of it. So it's like I said, it's a whole different ask.
Right.
So I, we and then it's a different type of training. Logging in the woods would while it requires a lot of strength, it's more of an endurance type of, they got to be able to come and go and sustain a certain load coming back, forth, you know, for several hours coming back and forth. Whereas a horse pull is more of like a power lifting type of situation. We it's not about endurance. It's about a shorter. We're not trying to run a marathon at a horse pull. We're trying to pull maximum amount of weight in 30 foot of space. So it's a
Right.
different type of training, different type of
Um,
strength training.
right. And do you, I guess not. I'm gonna try to answer my question myself, but I guess not. Do you shoe them differently for both event, or do you use the same? Because
No,
I just assume you were shoeing your horses, but I'm assuming that.
yeah, I shoe my horses myself. That came when I first started. I didn't know how to shoe a horse, but I learned quickly out of necessity because no disrespect to farriers, but farriers are very independent people. So, yeah, around here, anyways, they might come tomorrow and shoe your horse. They might not. So um, I had to learn how to shoe my horses, and through the years, I have my own way that I don't build. I buy flat plates, draft plates, and then from there I build the shoes myself, and I have a style that I've developed that I would say is an all terrain type of situation. The way that I put the cleats
Right.
on the horses, you know, I put I don't put one solid toe plate. I put two individual toe plates. It's more like a set of cleats, and I roll them around the circumference of the front of the shoe as far as I can, and there's a space between the toe plates, and they're on the same angle as the shoe. They're not straight across because, from my experience, most big horses, when they're coming, they don't come directly straight over the top of their front feet when they're pulling hard. They'll curl their feet a little bit. There's a little bit. They don't come straight over top of the point of their hoof. They curl them in a little bit, just a little. When they're really reaching out there and getting a hold, and they're pulling, they'll curl those feet to the and it, so if you got a straight toe plate on the front, and I came to this, if I'm pulling side hill and my horse is on sideland ground and he's curling his feet to the inside a little, he's pulling his toe plate out of the ground. And once his toe plate comes out of the ground a little bit, he's going to fall. He's going to lose his traction. So I split the toe plate in half and rolled that outside
Hmm.
cleat as far around as I can. So when he's curling that foot and he's still getting traction. And then my heel calks, I don't bend the end of the shoes down traditional. I weld individual heel calks up under the heels, and I put them at just a very slight angle inward. So, because I work a lot of rough ground, and it's inevitable the horses step on themselves or step on each other. So the heel calks have got a slight angle. So if they steps on his hoof, or his partner's hoof, that the caulk will slide off the hoof. It's got just a slight inward angle, and and I have to keep my horses. Uh, I have to have enough shoe hanging off the heels for them to be properly shod, but I keep it to a minimum because if you've got a lot of heel, they're going to pull shoes on rough ground.
Right.
There's no way around it. I learned that the hard way. If you're on rough ground, they're especially working single on rough ground, they're going to step on themselves and pull shoes if you've got a bunch of heel hanging off the end of those shoes. And like I said, and so I keep the heels shorter, and I put the heel caulks up under the heels, not behind the heel.
Right.
And I've been so I call it an all terrain type of, because it works well on mud, dry ground, uh, and everything in between. I've had real good luck with what I'm doing, and it's something that I've developed over many years from trial and error.
Um, do you think you could send me a picture that I could share online or with the folks here? But that's very interesting. And like, what material do you put as um underneath it? Like what can
I for years, my best friend out of high school was a pipe fitter, and he managed to get a hold of 100 pound, 250 pound boxes of hard surfacing rod. I used those for years. It's a welding rod that you stick weld on, and it puts a very hardened surface on the cleats. That's a good wear. They wear well, but the drawback to that is that they don't do well on pavement.
mm,
All right. So and so through the years, I used all those up, and so then I bought in the last couple of years I got into using those borium sticks, the steel sticks with the pelletized borium in them, and I've been brazing that on the cleats, and I really like that.
well,
I really like it, and I think that that's actually superior than the hard surface welding rods I use, because they grip pavement and rock much better, or even like ice and stuff. They really get better grip. So that was an improvement over the last few years. And then the other thing I do to my shoes that I've never seen anybody else do is, now with those hard surfacing rods around the outside circumference of the shoe, I run a bead about 1/8 of an inch tall around the outside surface with that hard surfacer. And believe it or not, what it does, it keeps from rounding the outside of the shoe off. Because once you round the outside of the shoe, and it don't take much rounding, when you get on rough ground, them things don't get any traction when that part of the shoe's against the ground. So with that that bead of weld with that hard surfacing rod around there, it gives it purchase, and it keeps the shoe square. And it also keeps from rocks when you're on rocky ground, because most timber in this area, the forest floor is very rocky, gravelly, and uh, that'll keep rocks, when the horses slip, from peeling the nails out. Rocks will take and peel your nails out of your shoes, and so that's very effective. It keeps it from doing that. So that's one
and do you
other innovation that I've put into my horseshoes.
do you do you put pads in winter, or do you have a lot I don't know how much snow you have down there.
We don't have we used to have quite a bit of snow every year, and in the my first few years of logging, uh, I didn't know what a snow pad was. So you know, I I just didn't. I had never been introduced to them. Now for me here in this area, I really don't need them. We don't.
Right.
It don't snow enough. We still get snow, but it doesn't. If we get snow on and it stays on the ground for a week, that's a long time. anymore. And even back, years ago, I've logged through the first my first year in logging was when we had the blizzard right at the end. The was it January 2nd, 1996. We had that big blizzard come in. It snowed 3 foot here, and it took. I had my horses on the job. Me and the fellow I was working with at the time, we had two teams over. It took us 2 days to get to the horse. Uh, but what I found in my situation, once we made a couple trips in and out of the woods, the snow wasn't really an issue as far as snowballs under their feet and stuff. Once you got that trail packed down and drugged down, we never
Yeah.
had much issue with it. And then, other than that, we were keeping the horses in the stall so they wouldn't having to deal with running around in the field and getting the big snowballs under their feet. My horses still do that some now when we get a wet snow. Like I said, it's just never been a long enough period of time. It's really not. It doesn't. It's not very advantageous for me to put them on. So.
Right. Um, I just saw the time, and there's 15 minutes left. I have so many other questions. I could we could go on forever, but I want to make sure, is there anyone in here that would want to ask a question to Chad before the end um of this step chat? And you can just open your mic and talk directly if there is any question.
I guess I've got a question.
Go ahead, Noah.
Thank you. Chad, you mentioned you work studs a lot. You mentioned that you work studs in teams, or at least you may have in the past. I don't know. Uh, are you doing anything like using a jockey stick or to help get as you're starting to train them? What are you doing? Sort of take some precautions as you work them. Prevent them from tearing at each other, or maybe you're not maybe not using them during the breeding season. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious to see how you approach that. Thank you.
I have no, I've never I've never used a jockey stick or anything. I've never had a lot of problem with it personally, as far as the horses, uh, stud horses. I've always had a stud horse. My first little Suffolk mare that I had, the first foal we bred out of her was a little stallion that I kept for many years. I raised him. He weighed 1,500 pounds soaking wet, but he was a good little feller, and I logged him till he was. I guess we worked him till he was about 18 years old. Um, all the stallions I've had, I've raised them, and I think because of that, because I've always had from the time they were born, we always had our hands on them, and um, I never. It seems like we would have an understanding with the horses when I went and put a halter on them and a lead rope. They're on my time, and especially once we put a harness on them, it no monkey business. And every now and then, they would test you, but it seems like just with just being a little firm with them, so to speak. Nothing outrageous. Generally kept them in line. So. Uh, And I've worked stallion. We had a Brabant Suffolk Cross stallion with my current stallion we have now, and they got along pretty well. They were half brothers, and I've also worked stallions with mares and stuff, and once we caught them, put them in the harness, I just really never had much issue. But I don't know if that answers your question well enough, but that's been my experience.
No, I appreciate perspective. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak or ask a question? Okay, then I have another question for you, Chad. Do you take men, like, are you a mentor to any local or anyone in general, or like, do you have people that are reaching out to help and like learn from you around your area?
I have in the past, but I haven't. It's been a while. Um, as far as much interest in it, uh, for several reasons. Uh, I did a lot of that when I was younger, with different degrees of success. Um, and just to be, honest, most of the time, you know, uh, unsatisfied with the results that we had. It seems like people would have a romantic vision of what this was, and no matter what, how truthfully you would try to explain it to them, that's they already had sort of a in their mind what they thought it would be, and then once they realized it was a lot of work along with all of the other things that they thought it would be, that changed things some, and most of the time, about the time that they would actually get to the point where they were useful, where it wasn't just actually a burden on me teaching them, where they could actually start pulling their weight, they would quit, go do something else. And so that's frustrating. But um, uh, they have been a few fellas that came through our program that went on and were successful, and so that does make it worth it in the big picture. But as I've gotten older, I've kind of got to where like I said, I don't have as much tolerance as I used to have, and when I go to the woods, I just have a mindset that I'm there to do a job and get things done. And because I, for most part, have production log all these years, I mean, I have to move. I have to get a certain amount of wood moved in a given period of time, just to make it worth doing. And so, I'm generally, focused in all business when in that situation, and I've got to be less tolerant of having someone there that I have to hold their hand, so to
Right.
speak. I just can't turn them loose and they can go do the work that I'm constantly, you know, and not that I wouldn't, you know, someone who was motivated and had some skills. It seems like lately, you know, as years go by, there's less people who have a base set of skills that lend themselves to what we do. So if you're starting out with somebody that doesn't have any of those skills, you're there's such a learning curve there. In other words, you need to start with someone who knows how to work, the way I put it, for starters. Knows how to
Right.
work, knows how to use their hands, has a certain amount of base skill, that then they can pick up on stuff in a timely manner and then apply what you're teaching them.
It all makes sense, and like as you're running a business, it's just not the same as like running well, it is not the same as running a farm, or I mean, it's quite different. There's
I've even got when I was young it's the same for me with the horses. When I was younger, as soon as we could get a harness on a horse, they was going to the woods.
yeah,
You know? but but I finally, uh, got through my hard head that now I'm not gonna even think about taking a horse to the woods until I work him here at the house for 20 days minimum.
Yeah.
Minimum 20 days. Usually, once I start with one, um, get a harness on them, get them started. If and once I start, I want to work them every day for 20 days. It makes a difference if you don't miss days. So
Right.
if I work them for 20 days, in 20 days I will have them to the point where they can go to the woods and know, start a load, stop, to back, turn
Right.
to the right, turn to the left, the basics, and not going to be uh, hesitant to step over a stick. There's a shadow, because what I realized is when I took them to the woods, as soon as I get a harness on them, then I would become impatient with their learning curve. Because I'm like, I got to get wood pulled. I ain't got time for you to be worried about a stick, or you don't want to back the cart over here. So, it would make it a confrontational situation. So finally, like, I'm going to go through all of those things here at the house where there is no what I call production pressure. And then
Right.
I don't care if we farting around here at the house for 2 hours just for them to learn this or that. It's more
Yeah.
relaxed. I can let the horse come and learn things uh, in their own time, and give them time to absorb what I'm trying to teach them. So that's kind of, the same situation with teaching people in the woods, as with the horses. Also, it's there's a lot of crossover there.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. There's been a suggestion in the chat that we go through the pictures you sent me and people ask question, and I think it's a good thing to end this DAP chat. But I had a personal question too. Um, do you put value of using your horses to extract lumber when you sell your logs, or is there a way that you like, do you compete with machinery or do you set a price that um either stumpage, I don't know how it works down there, but like is there a way you put the fact that you use horses in the price and in the money you get from what your work?
Um, in this area, everywhere's different. In this area, I've had to compete against the conventional loggers.
Yeah.
Um, the horses give me an edge as far as, people like the fact that, I'm going to do it with horses and not tear their place up, but they also expect me to pay competitively with the conventional loggers. So for the most part, that's what we're doing. Um, the the value added stuff is uh, can be a tough nut to crack, so to speak. I do have a sawmill. I have an older style circle sawmill that we bring low grade logs and pulpwood and stuff in, and stuff like that in saw it here at the house, add value to logs and that way. Um, but in the last few years, a friend of mine who I've worked with for probably 15, 20 years now, which he is on the board of DAPCHAT, Ian Snyder. Uh,
Yeah.
he's got his timber framing business that, uh, we do this harvest build stuff. And I've been doing work for him. And now that is where we get paid uh, uh, a better rate because of the horses and what they can do. Because we
Right.
can go in on people's, because most people are, again, don't want their land tore up, and we can go in and selectively take trees out that we're going to use to build that Ian and his company is going to use to build them a structure. I don't participate in as much on that end of things as I do the logging for him. Uh, logged jobs out, for him, and generally they'll either sit down and figure up like a lump sum to do the job, and it's usually uh, good money, or we'll work it by the hour, and it's a good rate per hour.
Right.
Um,
Well, okay, that makes sense. It's I
but
feel like it's hard to put the value in the logging.
my base business I've done here. No, we while people they see the value in the horses. Unfortunately, the bottom line is they still expect me. In some reason, in some ways, that it's I'm kind of put in a tough situation in that the expectation that people have of me when I go into a job is much higher most times than what they would expect from a conventional logger.
Right.
So I'm expected to do quality work, while also I'm expected to be competitive on what I pay for the timber. So, which is required me to develop the business in that. Uh, People ask me, well, you've done this for 30 years, and you're still using the same truck, and you're still, and and they say, well, haven't you grown your business? And they don't realize, well, I've grown the business in that uh, the truck is a special built truck, purpose built truck. Uh, I've developed my personal skills in as far as what I can do, what I can log, how efficiently, how much wood I can move in a day, and then through the years, my horses have gotten better and better as I've been able to raise horses or purchase higher quality horses, bigger horses that are more capable, and um, so innovations like I was telling you, to the log cart, to the harness,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things through the years have come together to make it a competitive business, even though we're logging with the horses.
Yeah. Chad, let's go through your pictures and have like a brief description, and if someone has a question, then we can answer it. How about that? And then
That
because
is
we're over time, but we love it. That's good.
that right there is we call him the horse in the front is Red Cedar. He's my registered Suffolk stallion. He's going to be 15 years old this year. He's been working since he was 6 years old. Next to him is a new horse that I started last summer. We call him Little Ricky. He's a Suffolk gelding. He's Little Ricky's got 10 loads of logs under his belt now. So that right there is taken on the job that that was taken that picture a few weeks ago.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Then we have this.
That right there is and this from the angle I think that's Cedar and Ricky again. Uh, uh, on the same job at the end of the day. Just just shows that's what we've gotten out. I think that's 2 days worth of logging there. The skid is pretty. We're right now. We're right next to the county road. The weather's been so uh, brutal, wet. Uh,
Oh,
all of this stuff. Anyways, we're skidding all the way from the top of the ridge. We're skidding a couple thousand feet here, all the way through the pasture down to the road. Um, so that's what that's showing there. That's my truck. We've got, I don't know, right there, but that's all poplar, poplar logs and what they call peelers. There's about 2,600 board foot on that truck right there. So,
And that's your.
and that's another picture. That's mixed. That's hardwood and that's some oak and maple and some poplar on that load. I forget what that load had on it. I don't know. They're not quite as long, 2,300 feet. That's my big team there. That's a big poplar log that actually was a blowdown. So it blew down some big timber.
Oh.
Same thing. That's the tree that before we pulled the butt log out of it.
Tell me if I'm going too fast.
Now that's my big pair there. That's Chief in Alabama, and that you can't really tell it right there, but we're coming up out of a draw, so just you can't see it in the picture, but the way the boundary and the land lays and stuff, we having to come up out of a draw and up in the skid trail across out into the pasture field and then down to the loader. And that's quite a big log that they pulled up out of the draw. If you can see the chief horse there on that picture, he's got a lot of sweat on his side, and that's
Yep.
just. I thought it was a pretty picture. I've
Yes.
always been one. I'm not the get up at daylight kind of guy. I get a little start. I start a little later today, and it suits me just fine to work till the sun's going down. And later in the evening is one of my favorite times to work. It's real peaceful, and that's my oldest son there on a job that we did back in the summer. That's him in his park ranger uniform. He came over after work to check on Dad, make sure Dad hadn't killed himself. So, but Dad hadn't. He'd cut that was quite a big poplar there. That butt log had a little over 600 board feet in it on a 12-foot log. So,
Wow. Nope.
I guess that tree had 2,000 feet in it altogether. That's my youngest daughter working the geldings, and out of all my children, she's got there. That is that was taken this past year in October, end October at Ferrum College, the Blue Ridge Folklife Festival. So that's my big pair of geldings there. We came in second place at that pull in the heavyweight division. We pulled 9,500 pounds, 14 foot there. So, and that's my youngest daughter. She's pretty much my partner in crime at these horse pulls. She if any of my children's going to be there, that's my youngest son Craig with his pet rooster, and we were working the horses on the sled that day, and he caught his rooster and wanted to see if he would ride on the sled with us, and he just so Craig and the rooster and all, we had a good ride there. Good work.
That was the last picture. Well, is there anybody else that had a question for Chad? I'm gonna look at the chat. First draft rooster I've seen. That's good. Well, if there's no other questions, then I think we could call it the end of this DAPCHAT. That was really, really interesting. I'm so happy I got to ask all the questions. That's just my personal my personal thought. But I'm very impressed, and I have so many other questions for you when I hope I can see you at a field day sometime soon. So but you really did a lot.
It's a lot unless we it's a lot. It's a big generalized subject unless we sliced off some really specific part of the larger conversation we've been having. It's we could talk for hours.
I know this whole group of people could. They've been shy, but I recognize pretty much everybody. But I know they'd all have like their questions. So thank you so much, and hope to talk to you again soon.
I was honored to get to do this. So I really appreciate getting to share a little bit of my story with everyone. So
Yeah, it means a lot, a lot, a lot. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chad.
you like I said, thanks for everybody's attention and listening to me for this long.
We could do more. We could do more. Well, I'm gonna turn this off, so
All right. Well, good night, everyone.
I mean I'm gonna try turn this off. Okay. Goodbye.
Good night.